whatever. Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay, just get that going, and we'll see if it's people can see it here. It looks like something's coming in on Restream.
I'll just leave it against the
That's good. These guys keep changing up their scenes like legit.
Jeff's phone died.
Yeah,
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
Do you have a like charger? Okay, there it is, Jason. I got it on Restream. Hang on, let's look on YouTube. I've got the pop-out chat. It's coming in on YouTube. Yep. Yeah, it's been live 28 seconds. Ding, ding, ding. So, Facebook. Welcome back. It's let's see, what is it? Well, Wednesday, October 6th of 2021. RealTuners episode 162. Thank you, obviously, everyone, for tuning in. And as I warned you ahead of time, this episode is going to be pretty much entirely about the story of the last, well, really, it's been about a year, but the last 30 days, it got pretty intense. That is us working on the Turbinator II car from the Vesco family. And we, if you followed us, you know we ended up, we didn't exactly achieve our goal, but we didn't exactly fail either yet. It sounds like we still have some stuff to do, but we made one test pass, and that test pass went really well. We ran out of time at the event between losing a day to weather, which made it a 3-day deal instead of 4. And then it probably wouldn't have mattered because we needed that weather day. We were working that whole day trying to get things to work. And we'll talk about all that. But I want to back up first because I thought we would have kind of a more technical chat about how that whole car works and how everything works, and it would be appropriate. And Josh Stewart, our Speeduino guru, was able to join us tonight. So he's here. I'm anxious to hear a little bit. It sounds like maybe a little under the weather, or have a cold or something. So we're not going to beat him up or make him sit the full 2 hours. But I thought we'd talk a little bit about how that whole situation worked out, which it worked perfect, by the way. It literally was, it occupied 5% of my time within the last 30 days. The actual, we made just small changes to software and had most of the hiccups were my problems, configuration errors or not understanding how things worked. But it worked really well. That part was great. It was the rest of the car that was a gigantic, kind of a challenge, I guess, is probably the friendliest term I could use for what we had to figure out. But so first, let me introduce Josh Stewart. I guess, you're the originator of Speeduino, is that correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I kicked it off years and years ago now, and I've been running with it ever since. So
okay, and was it? I saw. Was it a Hack-A-Day entry? Did you enter that contest back in like 2015?
Yeah, somewhere around there, 2015, 2016, somewhere around there. That was finally when I've been working on it for a few years at that point, but it had finally reached a little bit of maturity where it can actually be used pretty easily on a lot of different systems. And decided to throw it in at the Hack-A-Day contest. And I've made it through to the final round there. I didn't take out the grand prize, but got one of the runner-up prizes, which was
It's
great
awesome.
back then.
I mean, that's a big deal. So that's basically you started in the Arduino world, which if everybody can look up Arduino, it's a real basic. I guess it's a way to do small electronic projects. It's kind of an easy entry point where they've written libraries and there's scripts for you that you can use and kind of work from, and easy to do simple controllers to do things like turn on Christmas tree lights, or people use them for all sorts of different things. But you can run a combustion engine, either reciprocating engine, and now you can run a turbine engine. There's actually a hardware and firmware specific to running turbine engines, so which he wrote for us in short order. I looked, and it was just a little less than a year ago this week that we talked for the first time about maybe writing some code. And I guess, can you give me did you look up like how many hours total you spent writing code and kind of doing the requests we needed?
That's never a healthy thing to do. I don't know. I worked on it nights and that sort of thing, and it was just a bit of a hobby for a while. For the longest time, we didn't know what was going to happen with it, whether it was going to go ahead or what. And then we started doing the hardware designs, and that always sucks up a bit of time as well. But no, I haven't counted how long I've spent on it.
Gotcha. Interesting. Any idea? So how much effort was it to do the turbine offshoot that we worked on? I mean, some of that seemed like it might be a lot of effort.
Yeah, look, a lot of it was simply because I had no idea about these engines. So everything I was getting was from yourself, and what the requirements were just evolving over time as we learned them. Obviously, the firmware is really different. You take out all the ignition code, you take out all of the timing code, because none of that's relevant anymore.
There are no timed events that matter.
No, exactly.
Really,
exactly
yeah.
Right. It's really simple. Look, from an outputs point of view, it's a really basic system.
Yeah.
What you get from the existing Speeduino code was all your comms work. So your communication with Tuner Studio, all of your storage. So it knows how to store maps. It knows how to interpolate a 3D map and that sort of thing. That's what you're getting from the Speeduino firmware. Everything else was basically ripped out and just a new control algorithm put in for what we needed.
Yeah, so not real bad. It didn't seem like it was real bad, because you were able to get me. I'd ask you for something, and it had the usual scope creep of, because this would be the first time I ever built any kind of controller for a turbine engine. But it was there were a lot of changes from beginning to end. There were a lot of things I didn't understand, so I had to ask you to change a lot of different things. And it seemed like you didn't seem like you were burning yourself out, and you turned around quality results right away, very quickly. So I was curious if it was how hard is it? Because I know from working with other DIY EFI guys, it was a lot harder to get firmware changes implemented and rolled out than it seemed for you.
It initially was the most work in getting it to a usable point. So ripping out all of the code that was going to interfere with what we wanted it to do. That there's a lot of things in the firmware for a typical piston engine that you just don't need and can actually get in the way. Ripping all of that out. In fact, that was probably the biggest area where we had problems, was where the old code was getting in the way, and it was doing things that I'd forgotten about, and I needed to go pull a chunk of code out. Once it got to the point where it was, doing the basics of what we need, I had a basic state controller in there that said, what state is the engine in at any given time. Once all that was there, adding new features was pretty simple. We just added there were a lot of safety things that we obviously added at various times. But yeah, most of the additions along those sorts of lines are pretty simple now. The only other big one that I'm working on it alongside the standard Speeduino firmware, is things like the SD logging edition, which hopefully will be there soon, but didn't quite make it in for last week, but we'll get there.
It was okay. Our idea of having a Linux, we used one of those the police car PCs, those small things that looks like a car audio amplifier, but it worked fine. We ran Linux on that and just used it as though it had a laptop in the car logging the whole time. and that worked absolutely fine. You know, and it gave us more frames per second than we knew what to do with, really. But so the weirdest thing for me as an end user, and the thing that was done was the routine that the controller goes through to start the engine, because that's kind of weird. So how it works is, you, as a user, you hit a momentary start button, then the computer decides whether or not to go ahead and engage the starter, and then as the RPMs comes up, as the RPMs rise, it does different things. It'll start the base fuel, the cranking fuel, and the igniter, which is the spark plug, just sits there and sparks like once or twice a second. And then after the RPMs start to climb, you know, it'll either not climb, something's wrong, and it will time out, or it will keep climbing. And as it keeps climbing, it decides what RPM to roll in more fuel slowly. And there's this delicate dance of ramping the fuel in so that you don't go too high of EGTs, exhaust gas temp, while you're accelerating the engine, but you still accelerate it fast enough, because you can't let it sit at that same low RPM. You won't be able to recover. It won't be able to pick itself back up. It's tricky. I had trouble with the startup when we got to the colder temps and the higher altitude. I had to change things around a little bit. It was kind of interesting, but we got it working. Anyway, so I guess, does anybody in the chats have questions for Josh at all about the development of the firmware and the code? We use Tuner Studio. Is it simple to interface Tuner Studio, or what's required? What was required for you to hook into that environment?
So Tuner Studio is really unique from any tuning packages that I've seen, in that it's really flexible. It lets you design an ECU the way you want to do it. You define your own comms protocol and everything. That there are certain rules that you have to follow, but outside of that, you can tailor the comms protocol to anything that you want. And thankfully, that's perfect for something like Speeduino and something like this, where you need to change things pretty dramatically, and it lets you do that. And I've not seen that in any other tuning software. I mean, not that there's many that are as open as Tuner Studio, but really not much change from the standard code to what we used here. It was really just pulling a lot of the things out that were.
Do you need their permission to hook into that?
You do, yes.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, that's cool. Well, good job. That's good. I don't really have any other questions. Anybody else in YouTube chat? I'm looking here. Anybody got any other questions before I continue on?
I'm not sure whether you wanted to chat about the hardware at all and that side of things, because that was an adventure.
I'm sorry, say that again, Josh.
I was going to say, did you want to mention the hardware side of things at all? Because that was
go ahead and tell me how that started. So you had already been developing PCBs to fit in a variety of cases or things like that, but it looks like you're late. You were in the middle when I contacted you. You were in the middle or towards the end of your latest circuit board. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's an ECU I've been working on for a while on the Speeduino side, which is released now, but I'm struggling to get components to build at the moment. But what I did on the Turbine controller was basically rip, again, a lot of the things out that were in it, keep as much as I could. So all of the power regulation and most of the input side of the ECU was the same on the Turbine controller. I've got one sitting here. It's one of the boards there. Test wires hanging off it. So most of the input side was the same. We ended up ripping the VR conditioner off and then wishing we hadn't. The output stages are all very different because it's a very different control on the output side. We added a bunch of EGT circuits as well. I think the biggest challenge on the hardware side, and Scott, you'll commiserate with me here, is that when I started doing the hardware design, we didn't really have a strong idea of what it needed to look like. We had to sort of guess what things were going to look like in 4 or 5 months' time. So I tried to throw as many contingencies under the hardware as I could, and naturally there were delays in getting the hardware built because getting hardware at the moment with the IC shortage is just a nightmare.
One of those was having separate. We had onboard EGT amplifiers that were digital and offboard analog inputs for offboard thermocouple channels. But the EGT conditioners, and that was good. We ended up swapping to the Plan B on those, because our digital ones, there was a bunch of noise and current flow. We had problems with the power supplies in the car, multiple power supplies conflicting with each other, and it was screwing things up. So it was causing issues. As you saw, our data logs, our early ones were nice and clean, and our later ones were dirty because we had a bunch of weird stuff going on. But it still ran the engine beautifully, I'll add. There was no signs of fuel delivery bouncing up and down. We had a third party data logger on the car that everything allegedly worked good. We'll go through some logs here in a minute when we let Josh go. But so now we're all struggling getting parts, obviously, and that's what's making electronics production, getting product out the door for a lot of different companies are struggling with that. So let's see what else. I'm looking at hold on, let's check Facebook here. Oh, Josh, what is your background or day job? Can you talk about that at all? Someone's asking.
So my background was in computer software, but my dad was an electronics engineer, and I've been working with him on cars since I was 14 or whatever. And really, that's how I got my love of it. He was always into electronics and things, and we kept trying to one-up each other on different automotive things that we were doing. And I had a friend that started tackling an ECU project probably 15 years ago, and it never went anywhere. And then really loved the idea of it and just took off after that. My day job is nothing to do with this at all. It's a far more boring type position. So this is really just done on the side as a hobby.
Right. Nice. Very good. So that's cool. That's a good way to answer that. That's all I got for questions. People seem to be just kind of listening. So let's move on to the next phase. I guess if there's any, before we break into how this whole thing went down this last couple of weeks, do you have a website, or what's the best way for people to look into Speeduino?
Just send them to your Speeduino.com is going to be the best one.
Speeduino.com, Speeduino. Very good. Okay. All right. Thanks for chatting with us. Feel free to sit in as long as you like.
I'll hang out for a bit.
Very good. Yeah, and if you need to chime in, just unmute yourself. All right, next. So, you guys may have seen that I had made a post on Facebook, I guess probably 3 weeks ago now, kind of mentioning where I was headed and what we had to do. And I was kind of leaving it out there to see if I could get volunteers. I had my next guest here in mind, Cody Breacher. He had attended one of our classes a couple years earlier, and he had also come out during Speed Week 2019 and helped us for a day on the yellow streamliner that we were running the cup car engine in. And anyway, he was a real good crew at that point. And I remember telling him, hey, if we go back out there to work in the big car and you're free, keep your dates open. And sure enough, he did. And he brought a friend, Jeff Holtz, along with him, who's also here tonight. And then later in the week, as we got to the event, their buddy CJ, who was also there with Jeff, came out, and it was good because we worked the crap out of all three of these guys the entire time they were available, and I thank you guys tremendously. I guess Cody, start off with where you volunteered. I'm gonna look for that post, but tell us a little bit about how did you hear about this? What did you saw my Facebook post? Oh, he's muted. Hold on. Ask to unmute.
Am I there? Here we
Yep, you're there.
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, I was going to get married, and then I didn't get married.
That's right.
And me and a buddy decided to drive my 63 Impala out to California. So on the way out there, I stopped and hung out with you for a couple days, and that was pretty cool.
Yep. And helped us on the yellow car. That was when we were running the yellow streamliner. And that was Speed Week. Weren't the condition? No, it was October. It was World Finals. You're right. Yeah.
It was World Finals. A bunch of Volkswagens at the time, but it was
Yep.
Yeah.
I do remember that. Okay, correct.
So
anyway, and then I posted here a couple weeks ago, and you're like, "Hey, they're going back out." You wanted to come. You said you could come along, or you were available, and therefore you came out.
Yeah.
So,
initially, I wanted just to come to the glory at the end, which I'm kind of thinking would have been a lot easier project. But
had we started a week earlier,
me and Jeff were talking that if we got to change the tires or clean the car, we would be stoked just to be able to do that. So
I remember when Jeff rolled in, he's like, man, I'm just here to let me know if I can go run and get parts or whatever. I could wash top wheels or whatever you need me to do. And like 2 hours later, he was fabricating a plate to mount all the junction blocks on the terminal strips that we used. Because, we did use terminal strips necessary on this one. But anyway, he was. And then next time he was plumbing the engine, and it was interesting. But we all got in way over our heads. But so I guess you left. How long did it take you guys to get out there when you headed out from Quad Cities? Was it a 2-day drive?
We left early Tuesday morning, and we got to Utah around Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah, like 2 or 3 in the afternoon local time, right? You beat me by a couple of hours.
Yeah, like a 22-hour haul.
Yeah, it was 22 for us as well from where we're at. So, and I guess we just took a little longer. But we got in a few hours after you, and you guys were just finishing setting the engine in the chassis.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, was it like in the crate, Jeff? When you guys got there, was it in the crate or what?
Still muted, Jeff.
Oh, you're muted. Hold on. Ask to unmute. Unmute you guys.
Yep, you got it.
Yep.
Yeah, so when we showed up there, they had the motor hanging on we'll call it a cherry picker per se. It was ready but just outside the car. So.
I think it weighs like 600 or 700 pounds, the whole motor. So it's really not that bad.
Yeah, Rick was like, it's just a big block Chevy, and that's how we started. It was pretty cool. We walked up there and we could tell that, Rick has an amazing shop and he has everything in very good order.
I'm going to play a slideshow while you're talking. Keep going.
He did not want to, it's not that he didn't want us to help him, but you could tell he's not used to people helping him. So, the first day was kind of just being in his way. And then towards the end of it, it was just it was actually pretty fun to work in there. And the history and just the stuff on the walls is, unbelievable. And you can never even explain to people what it is, there's engines and things wrote down that are 50, 60 years old. It would be the coolest thing to have in any one of our garages. And there's just 100 of them laying on the ground.
He does. They have a lot of cool historical, like they're parked in the back behind their garage is a streamliner, a motorcycle streamliner that I guess held some ultimate class record for like 2 decades or something before people got serious about motorcycle streamliners. So anyway, tell us a little bit more. Keep going. So you get there, and what I guess the real issue was we found out that we had to basically be responsible for the wiring that handles the emergency shutdown and proper sequencing of the chute doors, right? Or how
that might have been the first moment that you decided that everything wasn't as easy as you thought it'd be. But we ended up the cables that come to the turbine engine, which are the military cables.
Yeah.
That was the first 2 days of cutting back shielding wires, and that was pretty wild. And then towards the, after a couple days, we were kind of getting back to crunch time. There's a lot of, I wouldn't call them special functions, but there's a lot of things that have to happen to make one of the parachutes pop out safely.
Yeah, so the clamshell doors have to open up first, right? But you can't, whatever triggers the clamshell doors, can't leave it actively triggered the whole time because it would burn up a solenoid. Is that how we burn, or how somehow one of us burned up a solenoid and actuator for one of those doors, and that ended up being a day wait.
Well, I think that actually ended up being one of the older safety circuits in it, the mercury switches. We had one that was kind of funky. And
it was active all the time.
It popped the door open on us when we weren't standing there. But that's an easy fix. It wasn't a huge deal.
Yeah. Yeah. So we fiddle farted around with issues like that for a good 3 days worth of that, or maybe 4 total. But got stuff figured out. I mean, we actually left for the event to get there, and we just knowing we still had some things to figure out. So, but we got it. We got it ready. So the first day we get there is Tuesday on the Salt, and it's they have a wind advisory all day. Nobody races the whole day. So now it's a 3-day event: Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And the Friday event, you only can run from like 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. And if you qualify, then from 2 p.m. till 5, you got to run your record returns, because you can't run them the next morning like you do every other day out there, because they're obviously closed, not running on Saturday. So all we got was one pass at like 10:30 in the morning before they closed the lanes down on the last day, and that sucked. But during that run, it actually was fast. So I don't know why my stuff is erroring out here. But anyway, so yeah, it made a really fast pass. I have a race render screen up here. Just a second, if you can see this. Jason, can you see that? No, hold on. Let me share it again. I suck at the zoom. Can you see that? That looks a little weird, but now it's not playing the video. Is it just black screen? All right, never mind. I'll minimize that. Well, everybody wait, because I'm working on a good data overlay video that shows a car going, 448 miles an hour was his GPS speed before he let off. So the system worked perfectly. Didn't have any problems with that. And the fuel, the time we spent on the engine dyno, if people followed that, the time that we spent doing that was very useful to let us know kind of what was going to happen on the salt. I got some data logs I can share too. Let's see here. I'll pull some of this stuff up. So anyway, what else? Any other unique things about the experience? I mean, what about like the backdrop? Did you guys like where I was pre-warned that, the Vesco family live in southern Utah, which is like absolutely scenic and gorgeous. Did you guys enjoy that at all, or did you get a chance to look at anything scenic?
So he lives in it's actually Zion National Park, right? So that's where it was. And so we showed up, and as we're driving, we pull off this road, and it's like, where are we going? Because it's middle of nowhere, beautiful Utah, right? And I've never in like probably the last 20 years of my life not left somewhere for more than like an hour. And me and Jeff stayed at the Vesco house for a week solid, never leaving, never had to get food, never went to a gas station. It was a pretty crazy experience to be, met with such great hospitality from just people that don't even know us. Like the afternoon, they're like, oh yeah, we're making cheeseburgers and here's some sandwiches and chips. And
no, they were super good hospitality, man. They had good spare bedrooms, guest quarters and stuff for us. It was nice, man. They definitely put us up and took care of us, which is cool because it was a volunteer gig for all of us, right?
Yeah.
Nobody was getting paid. I'm used to doing this stuff and getting paid or whatever. Excuse me, as it's my living. But we didn't. Yeah. We didn't know. Yeah, it was pretty much all volunteer. So yeah. I guess how many days were we there? I guess we were there a whole week almost, weren't we? I think about it, from Wednesday till we were there Wednesday till like Monday, and then we drove out to the salt, I guess Sunday and Monday.
Yeah. So it was a solid 5 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I just remember I made a bunch of runs to the gas station to get these guys Red Bull and their favorite flavor of Monster or whatever that they wanted. And I had to go hunt them down at different gas stations just to keep them full of Red Bull, a couple gallons of that. But otherwise.
By the time we left that week, the garbage cans were overflowing with Monster and Red Bull cans.
Right.
Nights.
They would all walk in the morning and say, "You want any coffee?" And I'm like, "No, I'm pretty good right now. I'm pretty geeked up." But yeah, it's wild. So I don't know if anybody knows much about Vescos or has heard it. I mean, I didn't do much research when I went out to it. I knew that they were a pretty big deal, or a real old family, I guess you'd call them, the Salt Lakes and stuff.
I mean, I'm not old necessarily, but they've been doing the historically, their family has basically been at every Salt Flats event they can be at since like the 1930s.
Yeah. So, I mean, getting there, Rick has one of the neatest shops I've ever been in. There's cars hanging from the ceiling, and it's pretty cool. I was going to say, has anybody got any questions about how the car works? Because that's a whole work of art.
Technical questions on that.
Yeah, because everybody asks me how it works, and we kind of went through it, so I got a pretty good idea how everything spins, I guess.
Yeah, my browser jacked up and I lost all the windows for questions, so I'm catching back up with you guys here in just a minute. Carry on. There we go. Now it's back.
Cody, kind of back to the shop. You were talking about his shop. That was like part of the reason why I came out. You were sending me pictures of like trophies and cars hanging and motorcycles. And I'm like, man, I need to go check that place out. That was part of the whole deal why I came out. It just, everything that was there was so cool and unique. It was pretty cool.
Rick has a very good system. Like he's if you ask him a question, he's got an answer, which it might not be the fastest answer, but he has an answer and a way to go about it. Like, oh, I need to mount this cart to the side, and 20 minutes later he comes back and he's got 15 brackets and 12 bolts that are all labeled to go right there. And it's like, it's a level of organization I don't think I'll ever get.
I got the slideshow going again. Carry on. But yeah, of some of the pictures of his shop here.
So yeah, the Turbinator II car has it's 4-wheel drive. It doesn't have any torque converter, doesn't have any clutch. It's basically a direct drive straight from the engine.
But the engine has 2 crankshafts, right?
Yes.
So it lets it so that you can sit there with the engine idling, but if your foot's on the brake, it won't take off. It's just what happens is you end up with a torque converter, but it's a hot air torque converter. It's the exhaust of the engine. The second crankshaft of the engine is through a reduction drive. It spins 18,000 RPM, but they reduce it down to about 9,000 max, which we got nowhere near on this trip. And it's hooked directly to the drive line. Yes. But explain how it gets out from there. It's a belt drive out of that reduction box to an axe or to a drive shaft that goes full length of the car down at the driver's right hip. Is that right?
Left hip, yeah.
Left hip. Okay. Now, how does it go from that back to? It's got little differentials. Explain.
So it's got 2. They're basically billet differentials. Made by a shop that Rick knows. What was that guy's name?
Greg Peak, American
Peak.
Track Roadsters. They have a really, really good CNC shop.
So Greg Peak made the differentials and most of the transfer case, I guess you'd call it. And there's a company that made the custom CV shafts, basically, that run to the differentials in the front and the rear. And then I believe Rick said the differentials are like 1.5 to 1 or 1.25 to 1 ratio,
Gotcha.
just to give it a
little bit of reduction.
Not much. I mean, spinning the car, when you spin it up on to warm up the car, you run the tires about 200 mile an hour, and it's sitting in the car. It's an interesting experience because it's like it resonates. The whole thing vibrates, and it doesn't feel right by any means. But
I get away. I told Jason, I was like, hey man, step away when they're doing that, where they just whip the speeds up in the pits, because I've had chunks of tires come flying off on just the chassis dyno. And, an 8-pound chunk of tire at 200 miles an hour is like a lethal projectile. So yeah, I told him, I was like, just get out of the way when they're doing that. But you're safe inside the car where you're at. You're all protected. It's everything else I worry about.
It's crazy watching the guys, that work on them all the time. They'll be spinning tires up and they got their head down, they're touching things, and it's like, man, you guys are just super
brave,
confident. Brave.
Yeah, right.
And then the car has carbon brakes. They're Lamb, I believe, makes the brakes in that thing, but they're pretty trick. I mean, there's nothing on the car that hasn't had a lot of thought put into it, and a lot of R&D, and the drive shafts are some alloy metal that comes from helicopters that are impossible to break or really hard to break, and I'm probably giving away too many secrets. I'll never get invited back, but the attention to the detail that the guy has is a different level of things than I do, a lot better than the 10 relays I put in it, I could say.
So, questions about the engine here. Somebody made a comment on YouTube. I'm not sure who that is, but it's a 4,400 horsepower capable setup, and I came up with. We tested it on about 4,185 is what I came up with for our peak fuel flow. Is what would match the number we would have matched on the dyno. So, but if you look at our initial pass, well, let's see. The Turbinator's best 2 mile on its best pass was a 503 mile exit speed. It did not average a mile at above 500, but it's on that pass. His 2 mile speed was 311.027, and ours was 334.5. So we were already killing it. Which is funny because our first mile was slower than that other older pass's first mile. But at the 2 1/4, their number was 373.5. Our number this time was 397.3, which is the highest. Both the 2 and the 2 1/4 miles so far were the highest recorded times in the history of Bonneville for those 2 particular increments, as well as the 3 mile. I was told our 3 mile was 420.789 average, and the previous run that they went 500 exit speed was only 400. So 20 and a half, 21 mile an hour slower. So anyway, it was on a tear. Data guy says if he would have been able to stay in it, we would have had our 500 number pretty easily on the average in the 5th mile, with maybe 5 or 10 to spare. So, and I was told it looks like I can actually put a little bit more fuel in it too if it'll tolerate it. He struggled with the throttle for the first, I think 1 3/4 miles. It ended up being something like that. But other than that, it looked like it was pretty happy. The throttle response was decent. The deceleration response was the important thing. He wanted to let off the pedal and have it reduce fuel right away. That went much better. We'd got that down from a time of 0.6 seconds to 0.15, where you would let off the throttle and then see a fuel pressure drop. So anyway, that stuff was behaving. I don't know, what other kind of problems did we run into out there?
So we bought every 5-pin
relay. That's right, yeah.
And
every relay in the town of Wendover,
Yeah.
we owned, because we kept smoking relays.
Yeah.
Why were we smoking relays?
Well, so I guess the way to explain it is there's 3 batteries in the car, and we have to be able to pull a trigger. The driver wants to be able to push one button and the car shuts off, pulls the chutes, and goes everything safely. To me, it's like, there's 4 things you could do, but at 500 mile an hour, I probably want to push one button and have everything happen too. So basically you have 3 parachutes that you can pull, right? And when those parachutes get pulled, it has to open the door in the back, pop the chute, and then shut the engine off, right? The big problem that we are having is the rear system is a 24-volt system. So in order to pop the door, a relay has to basically, get triggered for a 24-volt system in the back of the car. And then, it has to shut the engine down, which runs off of, the ground circuit for our ECU. And then it has to pop the chute, which is another set of batteries in the thing at the other end of the car. So you end up with, you have to use the ground loops and the triggering system off of 3 different batteries for 3 different things that are all tied together. We ended up with a lot of noise and a lot of backfeeding, but we were able to walk through that stuff. So yeah, and then at the end of it all, there's also a set of safeties in the car that if it rolls over or sees a lot of G-force, that it shuts the car down and
activates the chutes.
And
right?
Activates the chutes.
Yep.
Yes. So, there's a lot of things that have to happen, quickly. And basically the only issues that we had is everything worked too good. So it would shut the engine down at it basically, as soon as it started shaking, which we found that one of the mercury switches out of the 2 was a little sensitive, which luckily we had the second one and we were able to keep going with the show.
Right.
But besides that, then we had a couple, we on Friday, it was Thursday, we were 2 minutes late to get into staging lanes. We were just on the cusp of getting in there.
Like 3 minutes late. It was bullshit.
Yeah,
They
we
should have
had
let us go. Yeah.
It was as simple as a valve stem cap was hitting on a caliper, and it bent the valve stem. So it's just things are that tight, and when you're
going to go 500 miles an hour, ultimately, these guys are dead serious about not letting the car go out until everything is perfect. So when they saw that, it was fair. They had to fix it.
Yeah.
So I've got data logs up here. Hold on. Here we go. So here's a Megalog viewer. I got this from an export of RacePack Ron. Our guy Ron Armstrong was one of the founders of RacePack, and he's the data guy on this crew, and he is absolutely amazing. The guy is just sage, unbelievable wisdom. He's used to also race unlimited hydroplane boats with both turbines and with piston turbocharged Allison piston engines. So he's a legend, and he was also one of the original gurus at RacePack. But anyway, so I'm using Megalog viewer because I'm better at it. But here's the run. I started at 0 seconds, and the throttle position is the middle, the red, right here. GPS mile per hour is at the top in white. The two on the bottom, red, is the RPM of the gas producer, or the front, or I guess the rear crankshaft on the engine, not the one that's attached to the drivetrain, just the one that's working the compressor stages, the turbine. And then green is the compressor discharge pressure. And it's probably the biggest indicator of how much power the engine is actually making. So you can see here how and once you get pressure up to a certain point, it kicks in and starts really waking the car up, and it starts accelerating really rapidly. But our peak number at 56 seconds into this run was 448 something, I think. Maybe I'm looking for it here. 447, I guess. High 447s mile per hour. So it was moving, and it did that. It started moving at, I guess right at 0 here. So yeah, that was a pretty easy run for them. Look at the throttle position here in red in the middle graph. You can see he was kind of having to feather it because he was having trouble keeping traction. The car was actually breaking loose. The first mile and a half or so were really rough. He said he couldn't hardly see looking out of the car. Hey, Cody, explain to people what it's like sitting in the car, what the driver's position is.
So if you could, you ever ridden like a toboggan when you were a kid? Picture sitting in the tightest, your head fits in the hole that your head goes in, and your shoulders are as tight as they can get, right? And then you lean all the way back, and you're laying back. So you're like this. You basically got to put your chin down, and then your head's strapped to your shoulders, and then your arms are strapped to your chest, and your legs are strapped to the floor. You would feel every single bump that you could get, and I mean, it's wild. And I thought going into it, like, yeah, man, I'll be able to see a lot and I'll be able to do a lot, but you can't really do much besides stare at the blue line that you're focusing on. And I didn't even have the cockpit on it. So I would assume after he had the windscreen on there that it would be a, extra difficult situation. And then the sun was in his eyes. So.
Or a fire suit, right? You imagine strapping in completely. When Cody laid in that thing, and when he was doing a startup, he's like, dude, I'm just going to sit like out like this so I can get out of it quick if I want to. And it's a little too claustrophobic inside here. I had a picture up just now. I showed them of the yellow streamliner, which is even less claustrophobic and laid back than the Turbinator.
Yeah. And then you also have to remember that there's a drive shaft sitting next to you that's spinning 6,000 RPM.
No, at 8,000 or 9,000 RPM at full tilt, it'll spin.
Yeah, it's full tilt. So it's.
But you got to remember that belt drive system that's on there is the same thing that Gilmore drive that's on top fuel blowers, right? So it obviously, to me, I was impressed that it handled so much torque. We put a lot more torque through it than they ever have, and it didn't seem to have an issue. The drivetrain didn't wear out or bind up or screw up, or there was nothing wrong. Here, I got a picture I'm going to show them.
I think, Rick says he's went through a couple times. They did have, so I think it used to have like regular drive shafts in it or had some sort of U-joints. and that's what took the tire out back in the day when they blew the front tire out a couple years ago. So I think they've worked past that, and now it's a pretty cool unit.
Yeah, so it shows you sitting right here with your, that was kind of the out position, not really comfortable because you actually tuck your head, helmet, everything laying back flat underneath that.
So it's pretty cool. The car's designed that the steering wheel slides to you. So I mean, it's
The cab salt.
I wish I would. Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, he didn't say the whole story about it.
Nope, go ahead, tell the whole story. We got all night.
Yeah.
Where's Jeff? Can you hear us?
Oh, yeah. We were just talking about the time when the front tire locked up and went flat, and it filled the whole cab up with salt, and they had to dig him out.
Right, because the canopy blew off the car. That something happened, a tire got cut or something broke, and it blew a tire and took off some of the body, and I guess it filled the cockpit full of salt, and the driver did like scrape, they were scooping it out to get him out of the car. It didn't wreck or anything, and he was fine, and he was cool as a cucumber.
Yeah, I actually watched video of that, and he drove it off of the course a little bit. I'm not sure how far, but he drove it off safely out of the path of the track.
The next car, yeah, he got it off the course so they could keep racing, which is cool. That's how you want to do it. So what else? Let's see who else. I can't see the questions, so if anybody, Jason might see some. My computer runs like crap today.
Somebody asked, what's the theoretical top speed?
Probably like 570. I guess it would depend on a course. If you had a course long enough, I don't know if it could have enough traction. It would need a lot of traction, like this good or better, to go 600 probably, because at that point it's just wind resistance, and it goes up. The power required to go faster goes up exponentially. At this point, like they knew, the difference between 3,800 and 4,400 horsepower is only like 20 miles an hour. Right. So it would have to make a lot more power. It'd have to be able to put a lot more power down to go much faster. I mean, it's still accelerating pretty rapidly. If it did an average fifth mile of 483 or 480 something, whatever it was, and then exited at 503, then it was booking pretty good still. The problem is you don't have a long enough course out there to really find out what the absolute top speed is going to be, and the car might not even be stable when it levels out at its top speed. A lot of these are set up to be stable when they're accelerating, and then you drop the parachute. There's 3 stages of parachutes on this car, by the way. You have to do the high speed chute first, then the intermediate chute, then the low speed chute. And if you get that order reversed, you rip the rear end off. I mean, I don't know what would happen, but it's not pretty. Let's see what else. Missing anything else? How much fuel is used per run? Good question, Alex. So what did we end up figuring out? Less than a gallon of kerosene, actually. It actually idles faster. We were idling at like 60%, but that's not 60% fuel consumption. That's just 60% RPM. So it's idling at like 170 pounds per hour for a few minutes, and then it'll get up to a total use of, what do they come up with? 2,100 pounds per hour, I think I came up with in that data log. Hold on. I got to do some math here because I look at the duty cycle. Oh, he doesn't have it on this log. Sorry, that's why I don't know that. But yeah, it's somewhere, it was the fuel consumption equivalent of 4,185 shaft horsepower. And it has a 0.502 brake specific fuel consumption. And that's 0.502 gallons per hour, or pounds per hour per horsepower. Pounds per hour per horsepower. And yes, as James pointed out, that was also with a different engine. So James, the different engine wasn't that different. Really, it looks like the same pounds per hour fuel consumption results in the same speeds, roughly, or accelerative force. But what you end up with this engine is a little bit better headroom on EGTs. But it's clear that we're going to run out of N1 RPM well before we run out of EGTs. We were at 107% of N1, and we're cleared to like 110, maybe 109, 110. That should be enough to do the number that they're looking to do, though.
Did you tell everyone that we have water meth now? That was
Well, it's water injection. Yeah, that was the other thing we
water.
did. We probably didn't need it, but we added water injection because we knew that would help. The problem with the older combo was they were running into EGT limits first.
Yep.
So one of the old school tricks, all the tractor pullers at the dyno shop we went to told us, dude, you should run water injection because it'll drop the EGT so you can add more fuel, make more power before you run up to the EGT limit. And they were right. It dropped it. It held the EGTs down to like 1,300 degrees at full tilt, where it would have been the 1,500 plus. And the limits, they start telling me, hey, we need to start doing things like 1,575, start cutting back fuel. What other questions do we have here? I'm getting caught back up now. It's funny, we have a low listener count when we do this Bonneville stuff, but we'll have 1,500 listens in the morning on the podcast.
So yeah, the water meth, or just the water injection, excuse me, is a pretty cool system that Rick designed. It has basically 3 nitrous bottles up in the front of the car that he uses like a high pressure scuba tank. You pressurize it with a little small compressor, and then the 1 10-pound bottle is full of water, and then it's all activated off one switch. And then I think Ron's race pack was doing it off the speed or GPS. I think 350 mile an hour would turn on. So that was pretty cool. It all worked. It was funny. We took it through tech, and then Ron had me ride in the car, and he had the GPS set at 8 miles an hour so I could see if it was turning on. So I was riding through the pits, sticking my thumb out the window to Rick driving.
To let him know it was working or not?
Yeah. It was, me and Jeff, when we got out there, we were picturing lab coats, and it was like, it wasn't lab coats, but it was very good. It was a real humbling experience to see someone do such good work with no electric tools or old school air impacts. It was a trip.
So these guys told me if they got to go out there again, they're gonna like chip in for a gift for Rick. They're gonna get him like the basic Milwaukee rechargeable toolkit because they're out there working with like old school end wrenches and stuff. It was pretty hilarious. You could see these guys like, oh.
Entire time.
Wait, say that again.
And that generator was running that entire time. Some of that could have been, could have used a bunch of battery tools to eliminate the generator deal.
Oh, out in the pits. Yeah, they're the loud generator people. Right. If you go to the track, the guys that don't have the inverters have the old school loud generators. That's these guys. Well, that electric car, where the TV cameras they're all fanfare about how wonderful their electric car is. And I liked those guys. They ended up being cool. But they were a little too pro electric, and they'd have to run these. They had super loud generators running there. They had 2 of them going to charge that car between rounds. It was pretty funny. I'm just like, why don't you just put the combustion engine in the car, save yourself the step, but of charging these things for 8 hours or whatever. Anyway, the electric car did really good too. It went, hold on, I saved the numbers here. Eric drove that car, the 444, to a mile average of his last pass was 357.507. So it went to set the record for the electric vehicle, and it's the ultimate electric vehicle record too. Nothing's been faster wheel driven, of 353.870 miles per hour. So they got like a Google article and a CNN, and Jalopnik had a big article on them and stuff. It was pretty cool. But I thought the funny part was we went 100 mile an hour faster in the 3rd mile just on our test pass off the trailer. So the good news is that Rick and Dave, the driver, were really happy. They sent us a nice email. I should have forwarded that to the rest of you guys too, but a good email, a nice email thanking us for the effort and our teams and just in general how happy they were with the performance, because it took them 3 or 4 years on the other setup, the other control system, to get to that same point. And off the trailer, our little crew was able to pretty much beat or do much better than their previous numbers. So it seems like the program is still on track, right? It's going faster and faster each time. Feel like we have a good handle on it now. We have a great control system. I'm familiar with the tools to calibrate it. And most importantly, we've got a pass with great data now that I can use. So I can literally add in like 20 horsepower increments to the shaft horsepower output on this thing. And I can compensate via barometric conditions. I know I had Josh work on an EGT limiter because we were so afraid that we were going to hit our EGT limits. It turns out we're never going to need that. But I may talk to you about an N1 speed governor that does the same thing, right? That limits to N1 instead of EGTs. But now we don't need it for this next trip. Anyway, so other than that, what else am I missing? Was there any other good stories to tell? There's got to be some other good stories because you guys spent a couple of complete nights with no sleep getting the safety systems working on that car.
Yeah, so me and Jeff stayed up. I think we stayed up to about 2 a.m. a couple of the nights, and then on that Friday night, it was kind of everybody went to sleep, and they kind of said, "Well, we'll see what we look like in the morning." And me and Jeff decided to hammer down a couple of Red Bulls and Monsters and just knock out as much as we could. And then we woke up, and then everything was, everybody was super excited. So we got the car all loaded up, and we drove through some beautiful scenery, and I slept the whole time. We ate at a lackluster Wendy's. That wasn't very good. They didn't have any carbonation.
So Troy Langlo, I see he's listening. He's asking about when would we run again. There's talk of a possible FIM or a private meet still, pending some permit information. I was a little behind on that, but last I heard they were talking with the BLM, so to see if they could get a permit to run it again. Hopefully he caught that. Let's see. I think I answered the rest of those questions there. I'll try to play it here in a second. I have a race render video that should turn out pretty cool if it won't play here. I've been working with the data logs and with Ron, and Cliff Scott is the guy who does the video on the Streamliner. And I mean, let me tell you what, when he gave us the video for, let's see, where is it at here? I've started another one here. When he gave us the video for, there's a forward facing, a driver facing, and a rear facing on the chute, and the video is astounding. Actually, the locations. He's got a video camera in the tail of the car facing forward. So let me pull it up here and share my screen. Here we go. So this one. So you can see it right here. I'll play it. It's going to be kind of chunky, but hold on. And it's a really annoying noise this thing makes. Throttle is on the far left. You can see him getting out of it. Each flag is a quarter mile. And he gets out of it. There's the 2 mile marker, 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 2 3/4. He gets out of it right here at the 3 and then shoots out. Watch the G meter on the right drop down. Oh, he doesn't really see that many G's, about 1 negative G with the intermediate shoot that he tested. I don't know if you could hear me over all that noise or not, but anyway, so that's kind of a preview of the data that we've got, but it's pretty cool having your hands on data from your homemade or do-it-yourself ECU, your engine controller on a car that makes almost 4,200 horsepower and goes 400 and so far, 447 miles an hour. Again, good job, Josh. Nice work, man. It obviously the engine was happy too. The guy that supplies the engine said that, hey, that thing starts nice. It's very adjustable to make it start nice. It ramps up like he wants, and it doesn't flutter the fuel valve. I think a lot of that is probably the RC filter on the output. But the fuel valve gets a nice slow control signal. It doesn't have a lot of bounce to it, and it likes that. The engine likes that. So he gave us compliments on that. But anyway, that's pretty much that. Anybody else have questions before we let these poor guys go? What other stories are we missing, Cody? We got to be missing some good stories.
Let's see here. I guess the whole car is carbon fiber, right? So when we got there on Wednesday, the engine was out of the car, right? And it was one of those times like the engine builder sends an engine, the owner of the car says, I don't know what any of this isn't all right. So it was a lot of phone calls.
There was a lot different on this engine had changed because of the dyno. Things had been moved around to plumb it at the dyno. So things were on the wrong side of the engine, right? He got the engine and was like, man, there's a lot of stuff that's not the way it was the last time in the car.
Yeah. So it was just so we, I've never been to a place before where you go and open up a tub of -10 lines. He had a whole tub of -10 lines. He had a whole tub of -6 lines. I had a whole tub of, -4 fittings. It was crazy just to, you just digging through fittings and finding what you need. But, so we got that all done. The car has basically like a transfer pump in the back for like your diesel tank. Just they call it the farm pump in the back. So it's
the farm pump. I remember that, but to me, it's a lift pump. If you're familiar with the old school, it's the first stage lift pump. It's supposed to provide like a minimum of like 5 or 8 psi with the flow capability of like 60 gallons an hour or something like that.
Yeah, it was. It's. Say something, Jeff.
No.
So yeah, it's we were going through all these systems with these guys, and their terminology is, way different than anything I've ever heard. They're talking about looking at the logic, which I've never even heard of that before, but apparently that's a wiring schematic for anybody who doesn't know what that is.
The logic.
FADEC is airplane for ECU.
Yeah, it's full authority digital electronic control. They call it a FADEC. That's the airplane term for what Josh made for us.
Yeah. So that's it's completely different. By the time we were done for the week, I'm gonna put a turbine engine in a boat. I think I'm gonna build a jet boat.
Same here. We're all gonna put one in something.
Yeah, because they're pretty neat. I was trying to think of anything else that was pretty cool about the thing. So the transfer case on the engine, right? It goes down through a belt, a 2-to-1 reduction. It has pressurized oiling. It's got its own dry sump. It's got a belt, and then anything under 30 mile an hour, because it runs off the N2 shaft, has electric pumps that turn up the oil. So you have to get those pumps running and make sure they're working before you start the car up. Basically, I think we would fire them as soon as it starts spooling up, right? Yeah. So it was like I wouldn't, when you do something like that, there's a lot of checks and a lot of big checklist. It's probably a 2-hour process to get this car started and make a pass and get it going. It's not unlike a cup car or a more complex than a Pro Mod. And then there's 400 Zeus tabs to put in, and there's a certain order everything goes together, and it's a full production. And there's when I first got there, I was like, there's 10 people here, like what do all these people do? But everybody on that team has a job, and they're all fairly good at it, and it's pretty cool to walk in. It is pretty awesome to see him prep the car. But then they told me, they were like, all right, you have Cody and his guys, which is Jeff and CJ here. Rick Vesco told me, he's like, all right, I want your guys to handle the startup. I want them to be there. I want him to switch there's a switch in the cockpit that we switch from idle and startup mode to race mode, right? They called it the pit race switch. So you'd start the engine in pit mode, but you'd switch it over to race. It'd bring the idle up another couple hundred RPM or another couple percent. And that would
they wanted Cody to kind of orchestrate that in the end, because it's like, all right, you guys have gotten so good at starting it, know what sequence to go through, and you're doing it more quickly. I remember telling you a few days earlier, I was like, listen, we have to make it so every time we want to start this thing, we can do it in 10 minutes or less. Because sometimes it would take 2 or 3 hours to get a successful start when we set out to try, and we got that process down better and better and better until the last, day. We ended up looking like we knew what we were doing. But anyway, yeah, so Cody did the startup sequence. If you watch my video, you can see him. He's there with the driver, and then when they put the lid on him, the guy waves him off, and there he goes. So I thought that was kind of cool. That was interesting, because we know how to start turbines now. We know when to purge them and all that stuff, not to burn up the starter motor and things like that. There's all kinds of little tricks about turbines that are pretty cool. I have a lot of good vibes, or a lot of respect for the guys that take care of these in the helicopter engines in the military.
An interesting question.
Yeah.
Do you think you're making more power in the engine than it made in the aircraft it came out of?
Do we think we're making more power in here than the aircraft that it came out of? Yes, I do. And the reason for that, we're making a little bit more. So let me ask that question again. It was, do you think you're making more power out of this engine than the aircraft that it came out of? Well, there's a couple of ways to look at that. So in the helicopter application, in the Chinook, they run this engine steady state at those power levels. And so they have different maximums for different amount of time based on the temperature that the end, and also altitude, things like that. They actually are low altitude engines. They don't run them at 30,000 feet. They run them at like 15,000 feet and below. But the answer is, we're running it for a short time, so we're capable of generating more power than they recommend, than the military recommends, for a short burst, like maybe a 10-second burst of 2,450 pounds per hour would be the max of our fuel valve. If we had to, I don't think we'll have to go there, but yeah, I can actually take it past the rated power and have it live for a little bit. For example, we can take it up to as high as 115% of their maximum output shaft RPM. Because of the way we're set up, we've been cleared to, our emergency rev limiter is 115% of where the helicopter guys would stop at 100. So that's we can make actually a little bit. The other reason we'll make a little bit more power is because we are feeding it at 500 miles an hour. We're feeding it pressurized incoming air. So what did he say? We were building like 5 or 6 PSI inside the airbox before the engine takes its air intake, and that's actually helping it make quite a bit more power. It's like compound turbocharging. What other questions? Am I missing anything else, Jason? Getting all these messages. Oh, Cody's got some pictures here. Do you want me to play that video, Cody? Hold on just a second here. Okay, somebody else tell a story quick while I load up this video that Cody took of the clamshell doors. Is that what you just sent me?
Overhead of the shop.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a picture of the shop. Okay, I'm going to share in now. There you go. Picture of the shop. Oh, with the old Turbinator up in front. What did you do? Go up in the attic to take this?
Yeah, so I was up in the attic rooting around all this cool stuff, and there's a small block Chevy up there that just says adjust valves, should be good for 300 mile an hour.
Right.
And then there's a billet Liberty sitting there,
Transmission.
Rick kind of got on me because I took the cover off it, and he was asking who was playing with it.
Right. You took the cover off this Liberty transmission. I'm like, uh-oh.
But so there's that's that picture of the shop. That's the original Turbinator 1 on the top,
hanging from the ceiling.
And
it's
then
a little bit shorter than the Turbinator 2.
So if that
Turbinator 1.
There's no motor in it right now. It's just
oh, this is it without the motor. Oh, and the motor's sitting there. Can you see that?
Yeah.
And there's a good shot of the drivetrain too. Look at that. Okay. Just take a look at this loop here, a couple laps. Can I pause this? Yeah. So there's the CV shaft. There's the drive shaft going down the length, the driver's left hit, or the left side of the engine compartment there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It looked out there on Tuesday or Wednesday.
That's what it looked like when you got there. I wasn't even there yet. Wow. Oh shit. You guys had a couple hours before we got there. So there's the chutes, tubes, launchers, and the clamshell door actuators. the rear door actuators.
Yeah. So Rick built every single bit of this car by hand. His buddy does own a CNC machine shop, and a lot of custom parts came out of there too. But for the most part, this is 25 years of this guy's life.
This car was originally put out in the mid '80s. By the way, there's a picture of a differential with the Lamb carbon brakes, and you can see there's actually the differential's got a shaft, coming out the center. But if you probably see it here a little bit farther, you can't see it, but there's a belt drive just ahead of this short CV axle there that takes it over to the side to this guy here.
A picture of the belt drive.
If you got a picture, go ahead and send it. I'll share it. But
I gotta close out here. Hold on a second.
there's a picture of the engine sitting there.
So we could talk about the EGTs and I guess if anybody doesn't know that the red cable on an EGT sensor is the negative one. I don't know.
Positive, and it's also magnetic, right? Which one is magnetic?
So the red one is magnetic and it's magnegative.
Gotcha.
I learned that. But
we learned that about EGTs. You can also chain 5 as many EGTs together as you want in parallel, and still read them with one channel, and you'll get the average of all 5 temperatures, which is kind of cool until they start burning out. But this here, you can actually see the EGT probes in the back where they stick in, and this harness right here, that's called the T9 harness. That's the rearward most place to sample temperatures. That's as it's coming out the exhaust right before it's blowing on. It's called the power turbine, but I call it the torque converter because that's what it's like. It's like blowing on an hot air torque converter. Let me stop the share here. Yeah, if he's got more, but that's what it looked like when we started off, and it was, these guys already had the motor, just had it dropped in when I got there, and then they were scratching their heads wondering how all the plumbing was going to work because the fuel came in on the wrong side and the oil came in on the wrong side and the CDP was on the wrong side and all kinds of shit was wrong. What's he doing? Is he sending me
me?
Yeah.
I was looking on my photos. I can't find anything.
Okay.
I thought I had a picture of the belt drive.
We'll dig one up and post it up later.
You might want to preview this video before that I just sent you.
Hold on. My computer is deathly slow because of how much crap I have running on it here.
What else is there on that thing that's pretty neat? I guess everything about it's pretty cool. So the way that Rick has it, the car has 4 built-in hydraulic jacks that he hooks up a little power tank to, and can lift the car up, and then we can spin the wheels over. And so he's got that, and then he has a custom-built bench basically that the car sits on, that he scales it, and every single piece of the shop is kind of designed to pick that car up, to move it around, to do whatever.
Cody, didn't you say when they scaled it from side to side, it was only 5 difference when you guys got done with it?
I don't think you heard it.
Yeah, what was the scaling difference? Oh, Cody stepped away, but it was side to side. It was a big deal to have it scaled properly. Cody, did you remember when you guys scaled this thing? Did it? How did it ended up going side to side?
That was Jeff. I was sleeping.
Yeah. So when we scaled it, the total weight come out to 4,617 pounds total, and then
lightweight.
The left front and right front were 6 pounds, maybe 5 or 6 pounds. So it was crazy to see that big of a difference, or that little of a difference, because up on the front there's a enormous amounts of lead hanging up in the front. So it was cool to see that little of a difference.
That's a big deal. He says that's a big secret to making it pull straight, with all being an all-wheel drive setup and locked, all locked together, front and rear, side to side. That the car would handles great as long as there's the same amount of weight left to right on both sides. And they've got the right amount of weight up front to make it so that the center of pressure side to side is always rearward of the center of mass, right? That's one of the reasons this car is so stable. You can see lateral G's and the logs. It really stabilizes above 300 miles an hour, and it looks like it becomes kind of a fun car to drive at that point.
Yeah, there was the belt.
There's the belt cog in that video there.
Yep. Oh,
Yeah.
hold on. I'll pull it back up again. Let me pull it back up here. Hold on. So start from the top. Tell me when to stop. There's the
It's right behind the wheel.
A little more.
diff. It's coming
It's right there.
right there. Yeah, there's the cog and the drive, the Gilmer drive and this is the CV, the drive shaft that goes all the way front to rear on the car. Right? And then he was following it all the way back.
There's Jeff. So this car, with the race pack in it, we're actually reading ride height all the way around. I think we got GPS,
travel. Yep.
suspension travel. I could have swore there was another weird sensor that he was reading. Oh, so yeah, reading, all the fuel pressures, transmission pressure.
There's a ton of stuff. He's reading everything. When the doors open, when the vent door, when the clamshells, when the fuel pressure, the low fuel pressure feed, the high fuel pressure after the mechanical. The engine has its own mechanical pump, right? And that you feed it 10 or 15 psi or whatever, and it will turn that into 500-600 psi in the rail pressure or manifold pressure, I guess, fuel manifold. There's Ron, race pack Ron, right there.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, and there's the clamshell doors, and then it loops over. Very cool. All right, I can stop. So, yeah, I don't know if there's anybody else has questions. Let's look and see. Let me know, Jason, if you see any. I'm still struggling to keep up with keeping both.
Can the gear reduction be adjusted to gain more N1 RPM headroom?
So, can the gear reduction be adjusted to gain more N1 RPM headroom? I think I was talking to Nagel about this. I think what they have to adjust this is different power turbine, much like you would restall your torque converter. I think that's probably what they would do. Sure, you could change your gear ratio, right, in the reduction if you wanted to, but that's N2, right? That's N2 speed. N1 speed looks like it's kind of somewhat coupled when you're getting high exhaust. It looks like it's somewhat trying to couple with N2, much like a torque converter would, like you would expect any normal fluid mechanics situation like that. I would think that they have different power turbine vanes or different kind of fin angles, I guess, based on the application and based on the shaft speed where you would want your peak performance, because these things have an efficiency window that you want to try and run in. So I'm pretty sure that's how they do that if they want to change kind of torque output for different RPMs. What else? Any others? That was a good one. Trying to get to our chat again here. Maybe. There we go. Yeah, so the Bonneville, Jerry's on here explaining that we actually met with them at the Salt at Speed Week. It was cool to see them come out there talking about how cool of an event that it is to go to begin with. So Josh, hopefully we can get you over here and attend one of these, because it was a lot of fun. It was a very good group of people and very good hospitality. They treated us nice. Yeah, there you go. It's 2,100 pounds an hour is 5.13 gallons of kerosene a minute. So yeah, we used around a gallon or gallon and a half, I think, something like that. Let's see what else. I think that's about it. No other further questions. We'll let these guys go. Any other thoughts, comments, stories, anecdotes? We're going to go back out there as soon as we can. The hope is we can go out in a few weeks if they let us run an FIA meet there and get some official timing set up. But if not, we have to wait till next August. And what sucks about that is the salt conditions were 1 in 10 years good this year. Maybe we'll get 2 years of that in a row. I'm sure it's happened historically, but it's not statistically very likely. So we may be fighting rougher conditions the next time we take it out, but That's why we hope to be able to do it here in a couple weeks. So everybody push for send good vibes for a chance to go run it at an FIA meet if they have a private Streamliner meet here. My understanding is there's interest from other teams. So, all right. Cool. All right. We'll bring it out. Send in the outro music. And then thanks you guys for joining us. Appreciate it. Jeff Holtz, CJ Durbin, thank you guys. Cody Brinker, Josh Stewart, very cool. We're going to try and get Rick Vesco on here for an episode too. He couldn't make it tonight, but some of the other guys will have you guys back on. And then obviously follow me or follow us on the RealTuners podcast fan page, and we'll keep you posted on if we get another chance to run. Very good.
Oh yeah. Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Thank you guys. Yep.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.